All right, I'm going to go ahead and start. Hello, I'm Paul Mellender. I'm an artist, a concept artist, and generalist. I work 2D, 3D. I work in film, video games, illustration, anything I can get my hands on. I've been an artist since further back than I can remember, and I'm doing some meetups on the rookies to go over any type of advice or drawing tactics or art principles, uh, any type of discussion or information that anyone might want to have or bring to the fore. And so today I'm going to be doing a little bit of draw over, and anything else that happens to come up we'll address as we go. First off, give me just a moment while I share screens and get organized. Okay. We're going to be looking at a piece by Edge from at the Rookies, and the I'll read the description briefly. Um, Hi, Paul. Robert here. I did this for a competition when the prompt was "In the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king." I know it's quite noisy, but I would love some feedback on the overall lighting, composition, and storytelling. I tried to go for a darker dystopian style image with inspiration from Star Wars, The Matrix, and the real world scenes, and World War II Germany. I really wanted to tell a story of how AI has taken over humanity and what both sides have become. Um, and for that, a couple of areas I think I would address first. Um, and actually, Robert requested going over lighting a little bit first. That is where I'd look initially. But a couple of things I'd want to go over with that would be, in part, the storytelling. Um, so let's let me get my screens coordinated here. Okay. The areas that I would look at would first have to do with light and dark, in other words, the intensity and the contrast. How that affects, in this case, and lands on metals, what is and isn't a primary piece, what might be a type of noise. For example, looking at the technical parts here, like the wires that as they land and dangle down into the scene on the tops of the heads of the people in the crowd. How is light being absorbed or reflected and contributing to and echoing a central lighting feature? Also, feel free to give me give a holler if anything seems to be going wrong in the stream with sound or any of the video. Okay. Now, a couple of things I'm going to do are the first part is I'm going to um, darken some areas. I'm going to make blacks black as far as possible. I'm going to focus the light a little bit. Part of my thinking around this is I want um, the central area, the star of the show, the AI to be an exemplar, the one-eyed feature. So I'm going to want to do a couple of things. One of them is up the chroma. Oof. There you go. For the casting light there. Actually have it cover quite a bit of area. And even if possible, have it imitate God rays a little bit. And for this, I'm using a soft light. It'll amplify and blow out the lighting as is there. So it's a pretty decent tool to use for something like this. This lighting also allows us to do some symbolic aspects, which are having things falling outside of the light. Everything falling within the range of the light can have a bit of tint and some corruption or some um, uh, pollution from and influence. We'll have that fall off. That may have taken it a bit too far, but it'll be fine. The next thing I would look at doing is so with a few different things. One of the things that makes metals, shiny things interesting is that they have a a pretty strong flavor signature embedded in the visuals. They also have feelings of hardness and sharpness and um, we pick up the metallicity of things and the sharp reflection of them very well and instantly recognize what they are. Some of the areas I'd address with that would actually be on the object itself, and though it is the feature piece, I would have a great deal of it not hidden, but not easily visible either. In the sense that it can be somewhat mysterious, and in a sense making it hard to see and misunderstood. Um, but compensating that with some signatures of danger, wetness, and sharpness. So I would, if there's like, for example, a spotlight coming down from up here to account for the lighting on the top of the orb, we can have some sharp areas of reflection. Okay. Like that. Um, Part of the thinking around this, and I'm actually going to have some of the haze from around here give us some lost edges. So that we can have some clarity coming out of obscurity. And I darken this area a little bit, or not necessarily even darken, but damp down and allow it to mix a bit with the uh, value and dropped chroma in the background to allow for the symbol to show up a little more starkly, that we can pick up the flag, but the eye itself, the repetitive feature of the eye can keep coming up. Okay. So let me ask real quick, Robert. Is so far is this meeting up with and matching some of the things you were looking for in your design? I don't want to go too off track and like hijack the idea and miss some of your intention or some of the points that were needed to get your story across. And I'll wait for just a moment for the reply on that. And I'll wait for just a moment for the reply on that. Okay, good. Uh, Robert's reply, yes, so far that is epic, very useful information. Okay, good. The next part I want to look at for this is some of the reflection of the basically the influence of the light on the objects, the people in the foreground, and the the legion of the influenced. And I'm going to sharpen and over blow some of the highlights, overly make them overly linear and sharpened and delineated. Um, One, because that's a visual signal that we is very basic and we pick up quickly. We derive a lot of meaning from it, and a lot of agency can be put into the different angles of line. This can also help obscure and um, double numbers, make things seem more numerous at first glance, and give a mistaken impression to an audience looking at it that there's more things than there are. And then when they have to sort their vision, they'll realize it isn't as much, it isn't as many people, for example, emphasizing different shapes like the cabling, um, showing this repetitive thing that people aren't going to be counting. But if we indicate the overarching pattern, it'll give a misread that there are more things than there are. As people look at the picture longer, they'll start to understand that it isn't that many, but they'll still carry away the initial anchored idea of too many pieces, of there's more there than they're expecting. And again, I want to add some overly sharp reflections, overly uh, exposed reflections, um, because we don't have to stick with reality. And sometimes it's a helpful thing to jump in front of the brain function of the audience and lead the witness basically into what they're supposed to look at. So a lot of times when you're making things that are hyper real and feel more real than reality, is you are jumping ahead of what people's visual systems are going to do, and you're manipulating the information in the exaggerated way that their brains are going to do it. So you're jumping ahead of it and pre-planning how they're going to misread what they're looking at so that it's meaningful. The When our brains are misreading, it's for the purpose of adding and sorting out exaggerated meaning. Sorry, that was a little messy on there. And I'm just adding some noise that still amplifies and gives across um, uh, the repetitive color scheme. In this case, because these are so close to the light, as unlike the patch over next to the machine where I want to have the emblem stand out more. Here, I want the redness to become signals because they are spotlit to basically make sure that the repetitive spotlighting and propagandistic emphasis on repetitive symbols is exemplified. This time, though, instead of having the central symbol stand out, I'm only going to make it marginally stand out. I'm going to have the red flag more of an exemplar than the white material, even though that's not a realistic treatment. I'm just going to have it signal just a bit. And the reason for that is that I don't want the symbol itself to overblow and have it be a repetitive thing that we're going to keep looking at and keep recognizing it. I want it to be a known piece, a known emblem. So I'm just accenting it in a couple of spots without it being a central point of focus. And I'm thinking the point of focus we'll want is the interaction with the audience. And the glowing face masks I want to exemplify also because they can also be like depending on the narrative. If it's dystopian, but is it a hopeless dystopian setting? If the conflicting whiteness of the masks might indicate some type of individuality or some unique piece because it's attached to each unique person. It can be a contradictory, almost like a contaminating or a virus like emblem. And I'm going to give these guys a bit of a glow also so that the interaction and the lighting itself does have some counteracting force. I'm just adding a bit of bloom here. Okay, I'm gonna do a little bit of before and after and see if that helped anything out. So this is the before, and here's with the more focused lighting and the attempt at drama. Robert, did that seem to cover some of the lighting parts that you were looking at? And to summarize that, what I would say is what I did is a mix of lighting This is always going to be the case with lighting, a mix of lighting and environment, so that it's a bit of both. um, take a look here. And pardon me, I'm jumping back and forth between a couple of different forums to see where questions might be popping up. Right. So if I don't see any other pictures popping up at just this moment, what I might do while I'm waiting for responses, work on a different sketch that I've been playing around with, and I'll, I'll draw on that a bit and wait for further questions or commentary or whatever might come up. Okay. I don't really have much to say on this piece, so I'll go ahead and draw for a little bit. And if I see other questions come up or other questions about work or samples turned over, I'll grab those. If something dramatic that I'm working on here should pop up, or a point I think might be of interest, I'll pause and explain it. Or if anybody has a question while I'm working on this that they'd like to uh, cover about this piece, feel free, and I'll go over the logic as to why I did it. Sorry about that. I noticed I'm not talking very much. I got kind of caught up in just enjoying drawing. Did anybody have any questions on any part of this so far? Okay, Robert had a question. How do you go about designing a pleasing object or character? Um, I'm gonna talk at the camera for a second about that. There's a few different ways to go about this, and I think there's a lot of discussion around things like appeal and beauty and building sympathies and so on and so forth. Part of that has to do with how much time you have. Like if it's an animated piece, if it's a piece that somebody's going to be having on their wall that you can put initial details, but also then have secondary and tertiary details that over time people will start to notice and start to build affinities, regardless of the first impression. So beauty is usually one of the aspects that will draw people in. And obviously beauty isn't an easy topic because some of it has to do with how things are shaped, how you're using line to trigger agency in someone, um, how you've used the face as an instrument, for example, to storytell. If you, and I'll go off on a little bit of a tangent here, if you have ever studied anatomy or seen any of the cadavers they use, or even been at a funeral, open casket funeral, and you see somebody who's passed away, there's nothing beautiful in the form that's evacuated. They're the dead often fairly look monstrous, not because of any feature change, but because there's vacancy. There's definitely feature change like relaxation of muscle and so on. But we beauty isn't a set of structures that we then go, oh, that person's beautiful. They have a symmetrical geometry or anything like that. Beauty is something that's written in based on variable motions. It's a type of storytelling that we do with our postures and our facial expressions and duration of facial expressions. What bright parts of our face, like our teeth or the whites of our eyes, or how our pupils are dilating. This takes place over a span. So when you're making a figure or trying to put appeal or how making characters so that they're interesting or likable, um, you have to put information into the figures that the audience will imitate and mirror, that you can expect that somebody who's looking to care will make the type of facial expressions or looks or have an understanding of moments of tranquility or mischievous excitement, whatever it may be. They have to be able to project and inhabit. You have to give them the line work and the forms that allows them to project and pilot in some sense to be able to understand the character as they themselves act in the world. They'll build onto that quite a bit. They'll be very forgiving to any mismatched lines if you're able to get the base structure that they're used to wearing themselves. If you can configure the lines on your paper to match the idiosyncrasies of a certain set of smiling or shy facial expressions that a person would wear in a circumstance, they'll latch onto that pretty quickly. For trying to extend that so somebody can have a deep connection with a picture, you have not only one set of facial expressions or gestures or postures or two people having shared facial expressions. You have it so that it isn't one but several sets. So there will be a first noticed pass, but then a second pass that doesn't quite, it isn't it's going to be more subtle, and someone will have to look for it. People will experience it. They'll notice it over time, but it won't be a facial expression that necessarily matches other parts of the first pass attention grabbing facial expression. Let me see if I can grab it. There's actually a photo I have uh, that may help explain a little bit of what I mean there. Um, Let me grab it real quick. And it's a photo of Colin Hanks. I'll just drop it onto. Share this out. Okay. So this is Tom Hanks' son, and I noticed looking at this photo as I was exploring faces and whatnot. This popped into my attention because of the extreme difference in the two sides of the facial expression, and we generally will tend to look at faces and compare um, left side, right side, usually starting from a point here and pooling out information. We'll be looking at different points of fixation, different focal points using our fovea or the central point of focus in our eyes, and then using our peripheral vision to confirm back. So we're using one set of our visual cones and rods to read one piece of information, and the other our peripheral vision, which reads motion quite a bit better and distorts to read the other part. But with this, great, all over the thing, you can see his facial expressions aren't matching and they aren't coordinated left to right. But top to bottom, this eye won't be matching necessarily what's going on with either side of the face, nose curve, the kind of, it isn't exactly a contempt smile, but the one sided expression on his face. Looking over this, you'll see one thing at once. You'll pick up a thing. Oftentimes, looking at this, people will pick up the facial expressions on this side and make an average and composite them as an idea. Um, Sometimes they might take this as like 75% of what they're perceiving. This is another 25%. And then they'll be a little unnerved or notice something's wrong or feel like something isn't authentic, that type of thing. So when we're looking at faces and looking at people interacting, we don't have snapshot facial expressions. We read facial expressions over a long span, and we pick up an initial group, then that starts to extend out over time, and we refine, especially as somebody's facial expressions are changing over time themselves. We then coordinate and average, but there isn't a snapshot of facial expressions. Like when I'm drawing this woman, I'm going to be making it so that she doesn't have coordinated facial expressions. Once I get the pieces and parts I like assembled here, I'm going to be taking the coordination of what we like to think of as a set expression, and I'm going to be spreading it out in a way that I expect their eye is going to be, excuse me, their eye is going to be traveling the picture over time, basically taking the time to look at different parts, looking at the frame of the face again to get confirmation, looking at the eyes, the dark and light contrasted areas, the bright coloring of the lips, the shine on the face, shine around the eyes. We tend to gradually pick up a pattern. It's a fairly nebulous pattern, but it's a pattern that we discern and we derive meaning from. Given a good set of things like pleasantness and docile, gentle tranquility in this picture, for example, I'm also going to put in subsignals of pride and angles that indicate there's more going on than just the one thought that the person has, so that the audience, as they're looking through this, they're going to go through a hierarchy of how they understand emotions. And the first hierarchy pass is going to give them one signal, and then as their eyes circuit around the face, they're going to refine that, change it, land on other senses or projections of what they think is going on and how they're reading theory of mind into the characters. So that was probably a super extendedly long description for what you were asking about how to make a appeal, and how to let me go back to the exact question. Designing a pleasing object or character, but it is a fairly complicated issue. It's a good deal of it has to do with appealing to an audience who already has the capacity and ability to feel these things themselves, and then almost in a sense using their own bodily systems and way they wear their body to reflect off the picture and ping and recognize it and go, oh wait, I know what this is, and then in a sense walk them through a procession of different feelings, knowing that they're going to see A, B, C, D, and so on. Any image that you do that's going to have appeal will be fairly complicated. I've seen things where people talk about doing simple appeal and a quick hit. Those aren't exactly what I would call appeal, or they're usually referring back to something familiar or an expected pattern of some sort. So, like branding, or there's uh, a, a cognitive bias called the mirror information effect, which is if you show someone something, um, and you show it to them a couple of times, even if they're not aware you've shown them what it is, eventually they'll start to build favor toward it. They'll start to prefer it, only because they've already been exposed and they have a bit of a pattern recognized there. It's part of a process called grooming and priming, which is where you develop in an audience the pattern making to understand and expect certain information and certain signals. Um, it's a bit of a cheat. You're manipulating and growing your audience to understand brands, to expect outcomes, and to build endowments, to endow certain objects with favor and identification, and they'll find that pleasing. That's different than finding something pleasing in a narrative sense, in a way like in the world where you might be surprised by something, or something might catch your attention in a striking way, and be pleasing and drive your interest. So there's a few different ways that I think the terms and ideas here can come about. In one sense, it might be considered advertising. In one sense, the way to catch an audience quick with quick appeal, that's usually just referring back to what they already know, or what you've groomed them to be expecting. The other type of appeal has to do with life experience, projecting character, uncertainty, but pleasure in the uncertainty, things along those lines. So it's a bit of a complicated issue. I hope that wasn't too complicated. Okay. And did that answer the question okay? Sometimes I think, and feel free to let me know if this is the case, I may get a bit complicated or complex in some of these things. I will say, when I'm doing my own work, these things are in the background. I'm used to dealing with these ideas and configuring them and retooling them as I work. But they may not be very familiar to everyone else, and I may be saying them super fast. So if that's the case, feel free to call out any piece, and I'll ease down the complication of my description and step through it maybe a little more slowly. Oh, of course I did that. And if there aren't a lot more questions or anything, I'm going to wrap this up in about 7 minutes or so. And I'll be back on Thursday. And we'll keep doing these for a little bit until everybody's tired of me. And then, and then, yeah. All right. So I'll close out in just a moment. So again, I'll be coming back again on Thursday, again at 6 p.m. PST, and hope to see you then. Feel free to put any images that in the interim you might want me to look at whenever you happen to see this. If you'd like me to do a paint over or look at it and analyze it in any way, please give me a little bit of info as to what areas of focus you'd like me to look at and where you might be running into difficulties, and I'll go from there. So I hope everybody enjoyed this, and take care, and I'll see you soon.